And so I'm thinking, this is Jesus, and my spirit became hopeful because I realized I'm a part of a bigger story. I think if our individual stories are just consumed with who we are, they're such small stories. I mean, even if we live a great life, and I've always felt that we need to join our story with a bigger story, like a tributary that's joining a bigger river. I'm being carried along with Jesus' story, which is a much better story than just my little story.
Today on the podcast, I'm sitting with Mr. Mark Foreman. Mark is a good friend. He's my boss. He is my travel companion. He is a co-producer on Iraq, A Forgotten Hope, and the host. And we're going to be talking about ministry, pastoral ministry. We're going to be talking about what it's like to be a husband, a father to obviously the band Switchfoot. We're also going to be talking about what it's like to be a reformer. How do we be the hands and feet of Jesus in the toughest of places, and what motivates him to participate in those tough things? And so I'm excited for you to listen along and join in on the conversation. Mark, thanks for being on the podcast.
Honored to be with you.
So yeah, we've had Dave Eubank, we've
friend
had
of mine,
Jacqueline Isaac,
double friend of mine,
and now you.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, you're batting third. You're cleanup.
I'm in the shadow of some pretty amazing people.
Well, hey, Mark, today I want to talk about just three things. I'd love for just people to get to know you. I want to talk about your pastoral ministry. I want to talk about your family ministry. And I want to talk about you, Mark Foreman, the reformer, which everyone kind of gets uncomfortable about, but we view you as a reformer. I think you've been an incredible example, not only to me, but to so many on how to be the hands and feet of Jesus in broken communities, broken households, broken ourselves, and you've just been such an amazing coach and friend. And so thank you, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. No, the honor's mine. Love to talk about such things.
Yeah, and we made the Iraq film together, so I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Spent a few hours together.
I want to start with this question, and this question actually comes from Rachel. And the question is, what are the best steps for remaining a person of hope? So how do you remain a person of hope? You've been in ministry a long time. You've seen so much, been around so much heartache, so much pain. You've participated in missions activities all around the world. How do you stay hopeful, and how does someone like myself stay hopeful?
Yeah, it's a great question because the world's broken, isn't it? And out of brokenness comes discouragement, depression, and the loss of hope. I think the simple answer, it's more complicated than this, but the simple answer is to stay close to Jesus. And that's what I practice, both in my private life, every morning, like this morning, building a fire. Jan's still asleep, and it's just me and Jesus. And Jesus is very hopeful. His words, what he did when he was on earth, it buoys my spirit. So I get to see the world from his perspective one more day. The other thing is his ministry. Even though it's a broken world, we get to see a lot of lives fixed. Maybe not perfectly this side of heaven, but marriages, broken bodies, broken hearts, depressed people, we get to see them buoyed and healed and become hopeful themselves. And when you see those stories, it's just like lighting a fire underneath me. It's like, yeah, one more day. That's why I do what I do.
So your spiritual formation looks like is that every morning? Is that
it's every morning?
Is it a you've set a timer? Is it an hour? Is it 15 minutes?
Well, it varies. I mean, there's some days I wake up on the run, but I'm an early riser, and if I can be alone with him or praying with him with Jan, it usually looks like reading a psalm, reading some portion of scripture. This morning, because it's Christmas time, I was reading Isaiah 9. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And so I'm thinking, this is Jesus, 600 years before he was born. And my spirit became hopeful because I realized I'm a part of a bigger story. I think if our individual stories are just consumed with who we are, they're such small stories. Mm-hmm. I mean, even if we live a great life, it's a small story. And I've always felt that we need to join our story with a bigger story, like a tributary that's joining a bigger river. There's more momentum. And so when I have a bad day, an off day, I'm being carried along with Jesus' story, which is a much better story than just my little story. Then I spend time praying. I pray for people close to me. I pray for causes, issues. I've seen so many answers to prayer. I think that's probably the number one place we change the world, is secretly alone. And it's because I believe in that. I just take my position every morning like a watchman on the wall. And I say, okay, I was praying for this. There's some issues I haven't seen answered for years. And there's some things I see them answered in 3 days. And so that's kind of it. Sometimes it's a walk on the beach talking out loud like a schizophrenic. And sometimes it's quietly. Winter times is more... I splurge and have a carbon footprint and light a real fire.
A real wood fire.
Yeah, and there's something to that, tending a fire. You just turn on the gas. You don't.
It's cheating. It's cheating.
You don't tend the fire.
I commend you. I mean, that's unheard of in Southern California.
Oh yeah.
And granted, cold to us is sub 60.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's light a fire.
Yeah.
Temperatures.
So I think it was 49 this morning.
Was it really? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I want to talk, first of all, how did you get into pastoral ministries? I know your story, you're a hippie, long hair, musician, Vita bus, surfer.
I probably just out of curiosity, I became a theology major, sociology major in college, the two most complex people on earth, humans and God. So that's been my undergrad and graduate pursuits of who can know these things, and in that pursuit, I was asked a couple times, maybe a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, I was asked to teach in informal settings, mostly college students. And they seemed to get something out of it, and I thought, whoa, that's amazing. I kind of liked doing it myself. Went into youth pastoring after that. Almost split the church that I was youth pastoring because all these young kids,
as most youth pastors do, right?
Yeah, all these young people are coming to church dressed improperly, and the elders became upset with me and I thought, wow, this is tough work, and went back to seminary. But I love seeing people's lives changed. If you're going to have an addiction, that's a good one.
That's a great one.
Yeah. So I've been doing it for 48 years.
Wow. And you went on to get your PhD, and what was that in?
In pastoral care and counseling.
Counseling. Okay.
It's in the field of psychology.
Yeah.
But I was trying to figure out, why are some pastors not so healthy?
Interesting.
And why are church systems sometimes not so healthy? And how do we change that?
How do we change that?
Well, my dissertation was about burnout among clergy, and it was quite interesting. It was quantitative scientific study. Pastors, random sample in 4 different denominations, looking at their burnout and their depression rates.
Okay.
And out of that, not the study itself, but then out of that study, formed some theories as to how do we prevent that, how do we circumvent that. I think that there's some pastors that are prone to depression, prone to burnout. And burnout is really depression in the workplace.
Right.
And pastors are not the only people that get it. It's school teachers, people in the helping profession primarily. And so people that are prone to needing affirmation, needing base hits, needing, and you find yourself in a church where you're not getting a base hit. Either it's the board or the denomination that's kind of beating you up. You just kind of spiral down, and it's like a batter going to the plate and striking out every time.
Yeah.
So, and the attrition rate is really, really high.
Right.
So how do we go the distance?
Yeah.
And I think it's discovering our gifts, making sure our ministry is matching up with our gifts. I think it's surrounding ourselves with hopeful people.
Yeah.
I think it's being in the right church denomination affiliation where you want to do the same thing. And as a leader, for me, I think it's casting the vision correctly so that at the front of your bus, you're letting everybody know this is the part of town I'm going to.
Right.
And so anybody getting on the bus knows, and pastors haven't always been good on that. They're just trying to collect people. They're just like a bus going through town. Would you please ride on my bus? And which is good. But once they're on the bus for 2 weeks, they start complaining, and so for me, it was really important that I be a bus driver that wanted to change the world.
Yeah.
So if you're not into changing the world,
not your bus.
Yeah, find another church. Yeah.
I know Rachel's grandfather, my wife's grandfather, is in ministry and would preach on his tippy toes in his 80s. And I just remember being young, right out of Bible college, just going, anyone can preach on their tippy toes when they're 20, with passion and fervor, and they believe it and they're convincing. But I want to do it when I'm 80 and 90. So it's so refreshing to hear people who are thinking about that, because I started to sense that in my early 30s. I'm like, man, I'm getting tired. And part of it's just doing youth ministry for a decade. It's exhausting work. But there was something broken inside of me. There was a theology that I believed. I know how I'm saved. I'd never preach that you're saved by your works or your actions, but my behavior was totally different. There was something broken deep inside of me that I was ignoring and still trying to prove and earn favor with God. And I had to take sabbatical and sort it out. In fact, you were a big part of that, Mark, and moving here 7 years ago. And and what I love about North Coast, the church that you shepherd and lead, is that we have a counseling center. And so talk to us about that. I've never heard of a church having a designated place, their own office, many offices, and actual counselors, not pastors, but counselors on staff.
Yeah. We wanted to create a space that was kind of in between therapy and church. And so oftentimes the church is a place where I want to go to pray, Bible study, be with other Christians, but you often don't show your brokenness. And you go back to Jesus, and Jesus was the first to say, blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the broken people.
Right.
So brokenness is a thing to be celebrated, that through brokenness, we have an aha moment of who I am and who I'm not. And then so to have a pastoral counseling center that allows a person to come in, whatever their issue is. I was talking to a person just this morning who was talking to me about his brokenness, his shadow side, his whatever you want to call it, his sin. And it was so cool to see that he was able to get help both through one-on-one, but also through classes that we have, that he feels like, I'm ready to get back in the ring and to make a difference for God. I think in a secular setting, oftentimes it stops with me just wanting to feel good about myself. And as humans, I think there's a higher bar than that. I think when I get to the step where I'm giving myself away to another human being, that's when I feel like the image of God is shining the most. So we don't want to just get back to the 50-yard line.
Right.
We want to go ahead and score, and that scoring means helping somebody else.
I love that. It's so neat that, one of the things that you've communicated so well is everybody should be in therapy. Everybody should be talking. And that's kind of a stigma. Not even only in the church, but I think in society, that that's the hospital for broken people whose minds are messed up or something. And no, it's we're all broken. And I think society is finally starting to see that.
Yeah.
The church is theologically always recognized that, but I think that's been reformed and changed. And
yeah.
Thank you for.
And I think the operative word is transformation.
Yeah.
That twice in the Bible it uses that word metamorphosis, which is the word we use for butterflies.
Yeah.
And so we're all in this process of transformation. I think that's a bigger word than spiritual formation.
Right.
For spiritual formation is a great term. It's the most popular, but it kind of has a mold idea, like you're formed.
Yeah.
Where transformation is kind of unlimited with what you could become and what God wants you to be. And you never arrive this side of heaven. So that means there might be ups and downs along the way. I might have multiple periods of brokenness which lead to spiritual ahas and insights and redecisions that help me to redecide where I want to go, who God is calling me to be, or what He's calling me to do. And so we want to, as the church, celebrate all these little brokennesses and all these stages of transformation. Otherwise, we become like a revivalist church that says you get one trip to the altar.
Yeah.
We celebrate because you're coming to Jesus, but if you come a second time to the altar, we gossip.
Gotcha.
Like, what's wrong with you? We want to celebrate the second and the third and the 20th time that you're having a come to Jesus moment, because those are the things that change your parenting, your marriage, your business.
Mm-hmm. I want to come back and talk about burnout. What practices have you studied it, you did a lot of case studies, you wrote about it, you were rewarded with a degree and understanding it. So what practices did you glean from that study, and what have you learned since then about preventing burnout?
Yeah, well, some of those, we don't have time enough to go into all of it, but I'll just name maybe a couple, 2 or 3. One is to be in tune to who I am. And by that I mean, when am I full? When am I depleted? And how do I replenish my own soul? And for many people, it's different. So if you have someone that's very social and they're an extrovert, they get a lot of energy from being with people. Well, when they want to replenish, they're going to throw a party. I'm not that way.
Yeah.
I'm right on the border between an introvert and an extrovert, and I can bat both ways. So after a Saturday and Sunday, and I've been with people and people and people, I'm pretty depleted. So Monday is my alone day. I still study, but I'm not with people. And I can feel myself
coming back to life. Yeah.
Another thing that replenishes my soul is being with unbelievers. I just love unbelievers. I love doubters. The staff knows I have this joke with them that you guys get to counsel everybody, but I get to counsel communists, atheists, Muslims, and hardcore greedy Americans that are just, just want money, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I want the hardcore people that are cynical, that are somehow struggling with Jesus, because I get energy from being with them. I am that person. I'm all of those people, and I've been there. And so the doubting Thomas that everybody bags on, that's me.
Yeah.
like, why would I ever believe? And so when I'm with those kind of people in a party, surfing, just hanging out in our neighborhood, I get energy and have the best conversations, and they often turn towards issues of faith.
So cool. Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same. I've always been, I get more excited about being away from church than sometimes I do at church, but I think that's a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
I think that's how God's created me.
Exercise is another thing. I mean, that's just hardcore data.
Yeah.
Exercise is one of the most basic things you can do to counter discouragement or depression, burnout. So you'll find me in the water often.
Yeah.
Just paddling out, in a floating medium that is different than walking, different than sitting, and you're exploring the waves. And when I get discouraged, my wife will often say, "Don't you need to go surfing?" Because I come back kind of like a drunk man.
Yeah.
It's a legal high.
Yeah, that's so cool. I remember we were surfing once, and you had to go in, but you back paddled me on a set wave, and you're like, "Joel, I'm back paddling you," and you went around me and took my wave.
Oh, yeah.
I just thought, man, that's so cool. My senior pastor just cut me off, and
yeah. I snaked you totally. But I looked at the shore and there was no cameras, so I knew I could get away with it.
Oh, man. All right. Well, I want to talk about Mark Foreman, the dad, Mark Foreman, the husband. One thing that's really, that you shared has really been impactful for Rachel and I is that you take Jan, or you and Jan date twice a week. Yeah. Talk about those 2 dates.
Well, the good news is if you stayed married long enough like we are, you can date like 8 times a week. Kids are gone.
Yeah.
You got a little more money, and it's pretty wonderful. So, yeah, but the 2 primary dates are calendar, and that's a business date. Yeah. We go to breakfast, a place we like to eat, Claire's, and we just get out our calendars. We order big, we eat big, and we discuss. And sometimes we only get through the week, and sometimes we go through the whole year. Because we have our differences and our expectations regarding time and how we spend our time. And that was where we often got into arguments. I didn't know. You didn't tell me. I thought we were, and you just complete the sentence, and there goes the argument. Some people have arguments more about sexuality, some about spending money, some about the kids. Ours was always about scheduling. So we thought, what if we just took time to always know what was in the other person's mind, and they know what's in my mind in terms of what's to be expected on the calendar. Bam! Our marriage was just suddenly amazing. So we do that regularly, and then the second date is a true date, and there's a sign on the shore of that date that says, "No dumping allowed." So I'm with you all week long. Got a problem? We can discuss it. We need to deal with this issue. But I don't want to be blindsided on a date that I think we're just going to go out and we're going to talk about fun things and refreshing our romance.
Yeah.
I don't want to be blindsided with some issue. And so we have no dumping allowed. And we just have a ball. We just go out. And I think romance is something that has to be worked for. That we fall in love, but why do everybody fall out of love? Or their marriage just becomes like an old piece of gum. You can see it. You see marriages like, wow, okay. And we assume that after you've been married 3 to 5 years, it just becomes oh hum. But it doesn't have to be. You just have to work at it. And one of the ways I think about my wonderful wife, Jan, is that she's still knowable.
That's good.
There's parts of her that I haven't plumbed yet. Yeah. The depths. And if I think I have, like most married couples, like I know her, I've got to figure it out, then it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wouldn't go to a baseball game if you said, "Oh, I got baseball figured out." You wouldn't go to. I mean, it's the edgy excitement, the adventure that keeps us going.
Yeah.
And so we got to create those adventures in our marriage. Another thing we do is travel together. And, we couldn't always when the kids were young, but more times than not. Like we went recently to Croatia on our way to Lebanon. I was teaching in Lebanon to refugees, which is so wonderful. But before we went, we said, Croatia's on the way. What if we just have a week vacation in Croatia? It was amazing. And I'm seeing parts of her that I didn't know existed because we're in a different part of the world.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
That's really good. Yeah, it shows. I think that's one of the great sustainers in ministry as well, is just having a spouse who is viewed as an equal co-minister of the gospel. It's not Mark's the minister and Jan's the supporter. No, you're in this together, and I think that's makes for great sustainability.
We've been married going on 47, and we dated 3 years before that. So that's
good.
Long time to know someone.
Yeah. That's encouraging. Let's talk about the boys. You've raised two amazing young men who are very well known. How has that been for just your household? Raising two young men who've started a band, and now, I mean, they're world famous, and you're not world famous. Is there ever jealousy with that?
No. I'm sure they're not jealous to be me. And there's no way I would want to be them. I'm proud of them. I love standing on the sidelines and cheering them on. I'm probably the only tension that exists is everybody's got busy schedules.
Right.
So trying to figure out, when does Thanksgiving happen, Christmas happen? And fortunately, in our families, that everybody's flexible, and we don't care about the day. So if you're traveling or I'm traveling, we'll figure it out. I'm very, very proud of them. I was just looking at a photo. I was cleaning up my office, and I found the album cover of their very first album. So Tim is a senior in high school in that photo. And here we are, 22 years later.
That's amazing.
And I think they're working on their 12th album.
Yeah.
And what I'm so proud about them is that they are the real deal. Mm-hmm. They're not impressed with fame or that whole thing. They don't trade in it. They're just normal, regular people. It's their day job. It's what they do. But they really are the real deal. And so what you get on stage is what you get off stage. And that value of authenticity, it's true in our church. It's true in their lives. And I think it was true in our family that we want to be real people.
Yeah.
So you hear it in the lyric. You see it when you meet them. And
it's pretty special. I love...
And they're great surfers.
They are.
And they're a lot of fun to be with.
Yeah. I mean, the Bro-Am is such an amazing community event here. And, surf event, a concert, and half of Southern California turns out for it.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. One of the things I love about the boys' music is that just how thoughtful it is. I feel like music oftentimes is just kind of plug and play.
Yeah.
And you're writing a song to be a hit, and I feel like there's a tension there that is really well thought through. It's really theological. Do you ever hear some of your theology in the music and go,
Yeah, but I think John and Tim go way beyond me into more thinkers like Kierkegaard.
Do they come from conversations though that you guys have? Because I know you guys are so close.
Well, yeah, we'll go get a coffee, go down to the local places and hang out, and and we've always had that relationship that anything's possible in this conversation.
Yeah.
It can be philosophical, political, social, religious, or personal, and it just kind of bobs and weaves, and it's all, and then a lot of humor.
Yeah.
And we laugh a lot.
So cool. What would you've written a amazing book.
You never say no.
Never say no. It's a pretty radical statement for especially young parents who seem like they're always saying no.
Yeah.
But I love you've been so helpful for me in my journey as a father to help me understand that my role as a father, one of my roles is to help Liam and Leila discover the end of themselves, because that's really where they'll see God is at the end of it. And so where did you see that, come up with that, understand that?
I didn't see it in a lot of places. I think there's a graveyard of preacher kids, because preacher kids and missionary kids often see either hypocrisy or they see God as the one who stole their parents, which is so sad, And so how do you change that? And so we just, through a lot of mistakes, one was we decided to love more than we discipline, and that's part of the never say no. I think kids, they want to bring themselves innocently to their parents. It's kind of show and tell all the time. Look at this, let's do this, let's do this. And, growing up, I heard a lot of no's to that. No, I'm too busy. Nope, not now. Nope. And finally, you just stop coming to your parents. And that's the greatest thing in the world, that you would give birth to a human being and have the opportunity to see them grow up and influence their lives and they yours. So why not say yes when they say, let's play ball? Why not say, like, you're great at doing that? I see all these pictures of you guys starting a new baseball team, building a new baseball field, and you keep saying yes. And
I'm tired, Mark.
I know you're
every
tired.
time my kids are like, let's go play football, it's like,
you
never say no.
Never
all
say
right,
no.
all right, I'm in.
Yeah, because that's the way you build that bond.
Yeah.
And of course there's going to be no's, but say yes to the relationship, say yes to the opportunities,
Right.
and then there's very few no's to the issues of discipline.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, it's fun. God is so good to allow us old guys to relive life again through our kids. And, like I've noticed that, especially for me in action sports like skateboarding and surfing and snowboarding, going to a mini ramp, and which is like small and not that fun, all of a sudden becomes really fun because you see the fear in Liam, and like, I don't know if I could drop in. I don't know if I can do it. And seeing him find so much joy in such a small thing, or when the waves are just really bad and just like, this is the best day ever.
Right.
You're like, oh yeah, it is. And then all of a sudden I'm 12 years old again. And what a gift for an old cynical guy like myself to get to enjoy the simple things again. So
good. And if you ask yourself, so what is the goal of parenting? Which ironically, most parents have never asked that question. We all just thought, wouldn't it be cool to have a kid? So then you well, what is my goal? And most people will say, well, I just want them to be happy. And you think, wow, okay, so give them some more French fries, and they say, well, no, I want them to be successful, and that's a big one in America.
Yeah.
And that's sadly a big one in the church. Sadly, I mean, oftentimes pastors will say, I just want to have a successful church.
Right.
Well, the question has to be, so what does that mean? What is a successful, does that mean a lot of money, a lot of people? And you dig deeper and you say, well, no, it's actually that maybe my child would have a fulfilled life. Well, what does it mean for a human being to be fulfilled? And you dig deeper and you say, well, it would probably have something to do with knowing their maker and maybe loving others more than themselves. And that's where it brings us to the edge of ourselves.
Yeah.
You talked about being on the edge of a skate ramp and just dropping in, which scares me to death. But that's the picture. It's like, okay, you're standing on the tail of your board and you're going to put your foot on the front of the board, and then here we go. Well, all of life is that way.
Yeah.
Going to a different school is that way. Dating someone is that way. Marriage is that way. Ministry is that way. And helping our kids to live there, rather than always backpedaling to the safe place.
Yeah, sure.
So, that's been my journey of helping believers live on the edge of themselves, where I think the oxygen is really high.
Yeah. That's good. Okay. I want to talk about you a little bit more. We've talked about you, the father, the husband, the pastor. You're such a participant. Like you travel as much as your son's on tour. You travel a ton. You go to the tough places. You're not afraid of the tough places. How do you go from being a spectator to some of the world's most hideous and atrocious crimes and scenarios, and to being a participant of going, okay, I want to be involved and actually going and participating? How do you make that transition?
Yeah. I remember a day I was in Edinburgh, Scotland, and it was a church ministry conference. And it seemed like we spent all day doing nothing but just being religious. And we broke for lunch, and I went out kicking cans in the alleys of Edinburgh. I was screaming at God at the top of my lungs, just every beer can I could find. I just drop kicked that thing. And I just said, why are we doing what we're doing? Because life is so cyclical and mundane. And it not just applies to ministry, it applies to everything in life. So let me get this straight. You get up so you can go to work, so you can do your thing, and so you can go to bed and pay your bills, and so you can get up. And it's not to say that we don't have the mundane things in all of life. They're there. But we have to create the moments that take us to the edge of ourselves and ask, so why did you sign up for ministry? I didn't sign up for ministry to be safe or just to go through religious ceremonies or just take the offering or just sing another hymn. I signed up because I thought Jesus said, follow me and I'll make you fish. We'll change the world, That's what I signed up for. So, and I discovered that that's what most believers signed up for. Yeah. But then we go into this trance of watching the pendulum back and forth, and before you know it, we spend our whole lives. So how do we stay at the edge? Well, you can't. We all have day jobs, we all have marriages, we have families, pay bills. But we do need to break out and have these refreshing moments that say, Dad, that's why I do what I do. So for me personally, going out to another part of the world, and sometimes it's just going over the border in Mexico, sometimes it's just going down with the homeless in San Diego, and then, sometimes it's on the front lines of Iraq. But my eyes get really, really big, and I realize, oh my gosh, I am way in over my head. I need Jesus to help me do this. And it's that moment where I realize this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And then when I come back to my Clark Kent job from being Superman for 2 weeks, I see my world differently.
Wow.
Truly, the parts of the world that I have visited, Bhutan, Cambodia, South Africa, townships, Sudan, Iraq, all these places, and seeing how people bring Jesus to that community, to that population, I have ideas. And I realize, I could do that where I live.
Yeah.
What if I did that? For example, so I'm in Cairo, and I'm watching this thing called Kids Games, and they're telling me that they have 10,000 Muslim kids that come out through sports, and they discover in a very safe, indirect way the values of Jesus that leads to relationships with Christian coaches, and eventually many Muslim kids discovering the love of Jesus. I thought, wow, could we do that in America? And I thought, oh, we couldn't, because this is Disneyland saturated. There's nothing you can do to wow American kid, And some people pushed me and said, well, let's try it. And so we brought this thing, Kids Games, back to America. And it's just been a huge hit. Seeing 40% unchurched kids. We have 2,000 kids a year come to Kids Games.
Throughout like 4 weeks, right?
Yeah.
It shuts down the church in the summer.
And instead of a bunch of moms that want to, no offense to moms, we love the moms, but finally we get the dads involved because there's a bottle rocket or there's a football or something. And to have 40% unchurched people discovering the love of Jesus in a relevant way, it's phenomenal. So we learned that from our partners in Cairo.
From the persecuted church, an area that's very persecuted.
Very much so, yeah.
We typically have a mindset of missions being, we're going to be the participants of helping them, whether it's financially or whatever. But I've learned from you that, man, we have so much to learn from the persecuted church and the suffering church. Yeah,
and we would, the more we learn and hang close to the persecuted church, the healthier we would be in America. Yeah, we need them desperately. We are the blind, the wretched, the poor, and the naked that need that church. Yeah.
So let's talk Iraq. We made a film, Mark.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Yeah, you went 4 times. I went 3.
Yeah,
I was figuring it out that I spent over the course of 3 years, 3 months, or no, a month and a half for me.
Right.
In Iraq.
It was a big investment.
Yeah.
And how did you come up with that idea? I mean, it was a project that brought so many people together. I mean, at the politician level to, you think of all the reformers that we brought together and just our friendship, and it was a really unifying project. But how did it begin?
A friend, Randy, at our church, he had 2 workers that came to him who were Iraqi nationality-wise, and they said, and they were Assyrian ethnically. They went to Randy and said, genocide is happening to my people and nobody cares. And so Randy says, well, my pastor cares, and you should meet my pastor. And so they come to me. Randy brings it to me, and they tell me the same story. And I say, well, I care. And they said, well, what do we do? And I didn't know what to do. It was one of those moments where I was on the edge with my skateboard. And they said, what do we do? And I said, I don't know. Let's make a movie. And that way you have something that you can hand people.
Yeah.
And they said, great. How do we do that? And I said, well, I don't know. I have a friend that's made a lot of snowboarding movies.
Snowboarding, genocide.
Same thing.
Hand in hand.
Yeah. And, you go down the hill and kill yourself. So I asked you, and you said, yeah, let's do it. And we just made it up as we went along. As you know, we had this amazing fixer, Robert, who just knew everybody but the Pope and God. But, he made it happen.
We'd be like, yeah, we really want to meet with, the Archbishop or whatever. And he goes, okay, well, when do you want to meet with him? Like, well, normally the process is you go to him and he fits us in some 15-minute part of his day. And he goes, no, we can meet with him now. And he had so much leverage on so many people there. It was unbelievable.
Oh, we on multiple occasions met with the president of the Assyrian people twice with his cabinet.
Yeah.
We met with...
Well, they picked us up from the airport at 3 a.m.
Yeah. And
dressed up.
Led us off of the plane into this other... And then we met with several bishops, some that were kind to us, some that weren't. And the amazing Pope of the Assyrian
the patriarch.
people. Yeah, the patriarch. so gracious to us. And then all kinds of pastors, people in refugee camps. The list goes on and on.
One of my favorite stories was when we first went and we met with Pastor Kassan and in Erbil, and ISIS was still close and threatening, and he goes, come by the church. And we showed up, and there was probably 200 people outside the door, and they were angry, and they were Muslim, you could tell, and displaced people, and just everything from our Western perspective was going, this is a dangerous situation. A building with a cross on it, angry Muslims outside, and a locked door. And he's like, just make your way through the crowd and we'll let you in. So we made our way through the crowd. And he goes, no, it's okay. We're about to let everybody in. And we let them, actually, we give them a card. We don't just hand them food. We give them a card. We let them do the shopping. We give them dignity. And he just thought through the crisis and how to serve in such a unique way. But when we did his interview, I'm like, all right, Pastor Kassan, we can film this in such a way that we'll silhouette you. We'll make sure that your voice is distorted because we know how, it's unsafe for you to go on camera. Like much of the persecuted church, we can't really tell their stories. It puts them in jeopardy. And he goes, Joel, don't you know ISIS knows who I am? I'm the guy who works in the building with the cross on it. They can come get me anytime. And just that really kind of broke it open for me to see all the people we featured in the film of just going, we're not here to be safe. We're here to be an extension of Jesus in this very broken situation. And it's cool to see just a local pastor leading the charge.
Yeah, and he did it in a way, as you said, with dignity, where if someone just wanted food, they didn't have to listen to the message of Jesus. Most do, but he allows everybody to enter at whatever stage they want to enter into, just like our own transformation. And it gives so much dignity to know that it's God's work, it's not our work, and we're not these pushy people. And that was our journey, not only with Pastor Kassan, but working with the Yazidi people and with the soldiers on the front lines, just that same respect and dignity that you hope Christ would bring.
Yeah. And what I loved about Kassan, he's just so laid back.
Yeah.
He's like, the world's burning, but we're in each other's space and let's have tea. And he's just mellow, everybody else is a little tense. And he was just like, it's another day.
And he's become a partner of ours at our church with our whole missions program. And we loved to send support to everything that he's doing there.
Yeah. What was one of your favorite stories of that whole project?
Well, actually, one of the stories is not on film. I have it on my phone, but it's not in the can of these cameras. But it's when we went to that very first IDP camp.
Oh, Badra camp.
Yeah. Not Badra.
Not Badra.
But where we met, I think his name was Joseph.
And Miriam?
Miriam.
Yeah.
Was that Badra?
No, you're right. That was a different camp.
Different camp that we couldn't get back into later on. But just hearing how he had gone from being a Muslim to a Christian. His wife was going to leave him because of that. And then Jesus came to her separately, and she became a Christian. And then their neighbors turned against him, and so they moved to another part of town. And then ISIS came in, and the neighbors were turning them into informants of informing ISIS about them. And God spoke to him to leave, and they walked out, whatever it was, 20 miles, right past the ISIS guards and everything, and into safety. And now there they are in this camp, and they're just loving on their...
It's like a beacon of light out of this one tent in a very dark...
And she's still wearing her head covering as a culturally appearing to be a Muslim, because that's their cultural experience, which makes it safe for their neighbors to all befriend them. But they're on their tent is a cross. Yeah, it's just so beautiful to see.
I'm preaching on Joseph this weekend, and just the courage, like here's a guy who's ready to divorce his wife,
Yeah.
wife to be, and then in a dream he's met by God in a dream, and it changes everything. And I always thought, like, oh, okay, well, wouldn't you second guess that? And meeting Joseph, and I'm just going, man, you had a dream, woke up, and your wife and kids left you over that dream, and you were okay with it? That's how real Jesus was to you in this dream? He's like, yeah. And then Miriam has the same dream the next night, and there they are.
It's funny, the two names, huh? Joseph and Miriam.
Yeah.
There it is.
That's probably, I'm going to put that might be a good sermon illustration.
Oh, it'd be great. Sorry I gave it to you.
All right, I've got a question for you. If you could go anywhere for 1 year, to immerse yourself and learn something new, where would you go, and what would you want to learn?
Well, I just had lunch with some friends of ours who are in the jungles of Peru. They started there when they were young, and then eventually moved to the city as their kids needed more education. And then now that their kids are out of the home, they're going back to the jungles. And I just think, wow. So I do think about these kind of things. This is, how do we end the way we started?
Right.
For me, I've always had an affinity to the Southeast Asia. And I think I'd find myself in Bhutan.
Really?
Bhutan is a country of like 800,000 people, completely Tibetan Buddhist, and there's no poverty, but there's not a lot of wealth either. And I was meeting with one of the senators there once, and there's only 5 senators for that tiny nation, and they have a slogan for their country: gross national happiness. And they don't want things to come into the nation that don't provide for happiness for everybody.
Oh, wow.
Because of that, they are restrictive of Western ideas like capitalism and Christianity. So our discussion was that I thought that Christianity fit well under that umbrella slogan. That we're all about gross national happiness, and I think I almost had him convinced, and I would love to go back and kind of hang out there and live there. I'm intrigued by the Buddhist culture. I feel like there's a lot in the philosophy of Buddhism that is parallel to Christianity, but it doesn't actually bring you to a person. It's just more of an idea. And I think that would be one place I'd go to.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's good. All right, Mark, you got to pass the baton here. You know a lot of people, a lot of reformers, and that's what we're about here. Is we want to give the microphone to people who are really living it out, and maybe don't get a microphone pushed in their face or a camera or article written about them. So who should we interview next? Who's in share your Rolodex with us?
Wow. One person would be Hickmott. He's a PhD New Testament theologian who pastors a church that's blowing up in Lebanon.
Okay.
With refugees, mostly Syrian Muslims that have come to Jesus.
Okay.
I was there watching 31 new believers get baptized.
Wow.
And these are radical lovers of Jesus that are living it. But Lebanon is a very dicey country right now with Hezbollah and the influence of Iran all the way through Syria into Lebanon, and the Lebanese really fighting for their democracy and Christianity, trying to figure out. And there is this voice in the midst of it all, Hickmott.
All right.
Another would be the couple I just mentioned, Tom and Janet Wiest.
Okay.
Go down into the jungles of Peru. It'll blow your mind.
I'm in.
I mean, here's a couple that just They left their city house all over again, and now they've moved back and built this tiny little shack in the jungles, trying to earn cred and respect and let the locals know that they're safe, so that they can learn their language and begin to share the love of Christ. Another friend, these are all three very, very different.
3 for 1. All right, keep going.
I won't mention his name because I would need his permission, but he is Syrian Armenian.
Okay.
One of his parents was Syrian, one Armenian. So he was raised in Syria and married a German wife and lives in Germany. And his dream is to bring Reformation to Syria, and he thinks it all begins in Armenia.
Really?
So he's hosting this next year, this convening in Armenia, where one of the bishops from Germany is now traveling with him to Armenia to repent. There he is.
It's not this guy,
yes!
is it?
You already covered him. Oh my gosh!
I was like, man, this story sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And it's it's too late. He's published, so his name's out there.
But the rest,
what an amazing story.
But it's not over.
It's not over.
Yeah. The next part of the story is going to be more amazing. Yeah.
I can't wait. Well, that's a big, I thought of this a long time ago, and the editors balked at it, but I thought how cool it'd be to end our articles and never use punctuation, meaning that like the story doesn't end. It's going to keep going.
So because this guy's used, give me one more.
Okay. Okay. One more.
This guy is Vikas, and he is in India, and he is tearing it up in one of the top persecuted countries in the world.
Yeah. Top 10.
Yeah, and doing it in a very legitimate way.
Yeah. Wow. Well, hey, this is for you, Mark. Little gift. Thanks for being on the podcast. A T-shirt, some stickers, and hey.
So cool. And thank you, Joel, for what you do. Thank you for your ministry and your team here.
It's a great team.
I feel like we don't have many things that are underground in America, but underground is something that's so cool that the above ground hasn't gotten it yet, and I think you're right on the edge of where the kingdom needs to be. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
And well, hey, to maybe pick up a book for the holidays. Never Say No. It's a great book. Holy Jesus, another great book. I'm gonna plug it for you.
Yeah.
And and tune into North Coast Calvary Chapel on. Well, not this weekend, but most weekends.
This weekend you're preaching, especially this weekend.
But hey, thanks for being such an incredible mentor and friend to me, Mark. You've when I went on sabbatical, I had to solve that theological disconnect in my mind and inside of myself, and I also was looking to connect humility and good leadership. I'm a visionary, you know that about me. I have to see it before I can actually function in it, and you've been that for me. You're a humble person. You're a great leader, and thanks for being on the podcast today, Mark.
Thanks, Joel.